Andy Johnson, Minnesota State University. We are looking at using research in education, specifically critically reviewing literacy research. It starts with peer-reviewed. To be research, it must be peer-reviewed. Doing a study, collecting data is not the same as research. It is not research unless and until it has been reviewed by a jury of one's peers. They anonymously look at a study and they check the methodology. Is it sound theoretically? Are the conclusions based on the data? Are they apt conclusions? Then and only then is it published in a reputable journal, sent out to an audience of scholars or the general public. They can comment on it, and theories are built, expanded, etc., etc. But it is not research unless and until it has been peer-reviewed. That's an important distinction. By the way, you can read the abstracts of research and research studies to get a sense of that, and that will tell you what to look for as you are reading and reviewing. Is it a valid measure of literacy achievement? Are test scores on a reading subskills, on phonics or other reading subskills, or on DIBELS, is that a valid measure of students' ability to create meaning with print? Does that demonstrate that students are better able to create meaning with print 3, 4, and 5 years down the line? So always ask yourself, is it a valid measure of students' ability to write, create meaning with writing, or to create meaning with print? Scoring well on a phonics test is much different from being able to create meaning with print. In looking at reading research, skills-based treatment will result in improvements in skills-based measures, all right? But that doesn't tell us anything about students' ability to create meaning with print. If you give one group phonics instruction and another group nothing, well, logically, the first group is going to show improvements on phonics-based tests, phonics-based measures. That tells us nothing about the efficacy or the efficiency or effectiveness of phonics-based instruction when compared to other things. The second, or the next thing, when comparing something to nothing, something usually gets better, all right? If you give one group a treatment even remotely related to reading and the other group has absolutely nothing or limited exposure or no instruction, well, the first group is more apt to show improvements. But unless you're comparing something directly, one approach to another, it's not valid to say that is a superior approach. Unless you are comparing a skills-based approach to an effective holistic approach, you can't say skills-based is better than whole language unless you are comparing them directly to each other with similar sample sizes and you know exactly what's going on. The control group should be fully and accurately described. The differences could be due to sampling bias or error. The treatment group should always be fully described as well, so we know if the difference is related to extraneous variables or not. We should be wary of any research that does not fully describe the treatment and the conditions and the subjects or participants in a study. An example of something that I often see in literacy research, reading research, is that phonics is compared to whole language. That is such an error up front. It tells me that that researcher doesn't understand, because whole language teachers, holistic teachers, believe in direct and explicit instruction of phonics. It's not the what, it's the how of phonics instruction. So it's not phonics versus no phonics. It is, do you believe in teaching skills first and allowing students to practice reading later on? Or do you believe that direct instruction of phonics is more effective when set in an authentic reading and writing context? That's the answer to the question. And there's no such thing as a whole language approach. Whole language is a philosophy about how children best learn to read and write. Whole language teachers believe that phonics is simply one of 6 ways to identify words, all right? When something is compared to something bad or incomplete, the something is usually going to do well. And I often see this when people are comparing skills-based or phonics-first approaches to a bad example of a whole language classroom, all right? The something is going to be better than the something bad or something incomplete or something poorly done. And that's why in educational research, experimental research is sometimes incomplete because teachers are not consistent variables. A good whole language teacher can make reading happen. A good skills-based teacher can make reading happen. The teacher is the most significant variable in determining the learning of the students. Correlation does not infer causation, all right? If one thing is related to another, it doesn't mean that one thing causes the other. An example of this is phonemic awareness, the ability to hear sounds in words, all right? That is related to or correlated with reading success in kindergarten and first grade and higher achievement in third grade. But can we say it's related or correlated? We cannot say that phonemic awareness causes that reading success, because phonemic awareness could be an effect of something that happened at home. All right, students come into kindergarten, their parents read to them a lot, they develop more phonemic awareness than someone who is not. So yes, they test higher on phonemic awareness. You have this correlation, but is it the reading at home that results in the better reading achievement down the line? Correlation does not infer causation. We know that students with reading disabilities have a higher relation to behavior problems, all right? But we cannot say that reading difficulty causes behavior problems, and we can't say behavior problems cause reading difficulty. Correlation does not equal causation. Be wary of national reports or studies selected by experts or blue ribbon panels outside of education, all right? There's nothing wrong with these things, the National Reading Panel, all these things. They're not wrong, they're simply incomplete, because decisions about what is or isn't appropriate research is usually made by people outside of literacy learning, and literacy research, all right? And these people outside of education are often found in science or medicine or some other field. They tend to favor only quantitative studies. They call this the gold standard, but we know in education that research is much more complex than that, all right? So be wary of national reports. Who's the blue ribbon panel that selects the blue ribbon panel? These are usually selected by politicians or other people in the government who know even less about educational research and research in literacy specifically, so be wary of that. I favor handbooks compiled by experts in the field. These are all types of handbooks. Now, these handbooks are edited by preeminent, recognized experts in the field, and literacy is so complex that each chapter is devoted to a particular topic. So they will select an expert in that topic who reviews literature, research studies only related to that topic. So you have experts in literacy, first identifying expert in each of the topic areas, who are then identifying and synthesizing research in the field. And these handbooks aren't compiled by people who have an agenda. There are contrasting views within the same handbook of research. So these are generally very reliable and valid measures of what is out there in the field. And you have these things. Why do you need a panel of experts selecting sample studies to make a determined conclusion when you have hundreds, if not thousands, of good research studies from which to choose and that are selected by experts in the field? And the last thing, students with reading difficulty tend to get a whole lot of low-level skills instruction. What is taught is tested. What is tested is taught. What is taught and tested is research. So we tend to get a lot of studies looking at skills-based instruction versus nothing. Students with learning disability does not mean a thinking disability. They oftentimes don't get the inquiry, the discovery learning, the problem-based learning, or workshop approaches. They often only get the very skills-based. So we have to consider in our treatments, in our approaches, not only skills-based instruction, but these other higher level types of thinking that result in good literacy learning. Just an overview of some thoughts about being a critical evaluator of research.